Today's episode of Robservations is sponsored by The John Campea Show. Find The John Campea Show on YouTube, or the audio version can be found wherever you get your podcasts. Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it, especially if you love the movies?
Hey, my name is King, or as some of you might know me better, Israel. I've gotten around, but hopefully you recognize me from my own channel, King Tannic. There's a new show coming to the Burnettwork that I think is pretty exciting. Welcome to the Otaku Experience, hosted by yours truly. There is going to be a weekly series where we dive into the news and the world of anime, manga, and whatever the heck else Japan has to offer us. The show will be pre-recorded and premiere on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific Time or 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Burnettwork YouTube channel.
Hi, I'm DJ. I'm pleased to announce a new podcast which I am hosting called Architects of Imagination, where we talk to the brilliant minds behind your favorite video games. Join me on this journey and meet people that are largely behind the scenes, hard at work making the video games that you know and love. Hear funny stories of shenanigans that go on in the office, of which there are a lot, and get to know these individuals that are largely in the shadows, and get inspired about making games, the future of gaming, and where this is all headed. From AAA blockbusters to indie darlings, and the legends from the early eras of gaming. The first episode drops this Saturday, April 15th, with my first guest and friend, Evan Cook from Naughty Dog, the visual effects director behind The Last of Us Part 1. I invite you all to come along for this ride. Check us out wherever you get your favorite podcasts, our YouTube channel, Architects of Imagination, and our website, architectsofimagination.net. You can also find me on my personal Twitch and YouTube channels, both of which are undertone_DJ. We'll see you soon.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and the still as yet undefined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett. And once again, I am robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode number 844. And this is a special episode of Robservations. Because I am so excited about a new show that's coming to the Burnettwork. I wanted to do a show about it and introduce you to our host, a man you're going to come to love. His knowledge is vast. His geekdom is deep. He's one of us, and he's going to host a new show on the Burnettwork and wherever you get your podcasts, called Architects of Imagination, a game developer podcast. He's David Johnson, or as everyone knows him, DJ. DJ, welcome to the Burnettwork, and welcome to Robservations. It's good to have you, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to kick this thing off.
You're
Let's do it.
you're live, or we're on the internet live, and we have our one of our members, Dub MCZ, is already in the house. We got people
All right.
watching, so I'm excited to have the show. Obviously, you're working with Martika Ibarra, who hired me to do Designing Hollywood, so we're keeping it all in the family. She's a tough nut, that one. She doesn't take no for an answer, and
Yeah, she's great.
I got to ask you, we talked a little bit before. What made you decide to want to do a game developer podcast? And tell us about your life in video games.
Sure. Yeah. Well, look. So, I've been making games for 20. I'm losing track. 23 years, something like that. And it's fun. It's amazing. It's hard. Like the rewards are amazing. Just see people loving and playing the games that you had a hand in. But a lot of the people that are doing this, like in movies, you've got movie stars and there's sort of known faces and names. Not so much in video games.
Right.
A couple of the high end like creative directors are sort of commonly known. But there's a ton of amazing people doing amazing things behind the scenes, and that was kind of my first intention, was just to sort of shine a spotlight and meet some of these people and just let kind of them be known and kind of show what their path has been. And since I'm hosting it, might as well start off with my own journey in this. So yeah, about 23 years. Let's see, my first game, the first couple games I worked on were in probably 1998, 99, around there. I worked on the fourth Tomb Raider game as a character, did some character modeling on that, and then Microsoft Baseball. And then at this point, I've shipped, it's hard to keep track anymore, 30 plus games, something like that.
Wow.
Halo was the first sort of big one that I got to work on. That was just a blast. That was a super fun team to be with, the Bungie guys. I was on Halo 3, and then from there I went on to Infinity Ward, one of Activision Studios, where I was the head of effects for 8 of my 10 years there. And then since then I've moved on and started my own company. So I'm the CEO, founder, creative director for Undertone Effects. And so whereas I used to do effects for games, internally in the studios, now I sort of have a team of effects artists that I work with, and we're sort of hired guns. Studios will sort of hire us to get embedded and do the effects for their game. If it's kind of a very niche subdiscipline in games effects, so it's very in demand. It's hard to hire for. So me and there's a couple other companies like us that just specialize in this one thing. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. We get to blow shit up and make it rain. It's the joke catchphrase that we'll say sometimes. But yeah, all the explosions you see in the game, all the spells, all the magic, all the weather, all that's done by the effects teams.
Well, we were talking earlier. I was asking you because I have a friend who's going to this video game school in Redmond, which you knew. You have a pretty interesting story about academia and how you got into game design and working in the industry. And I wonder if you could tell that story, because a lot of people, I believe that video games and gaming in general is going to be what cinema was to the 20th century. Gaming is going to be the 21st century. And I think, cinema sound really came about at the end of the 1920s. And I think with the combination of AI, Unreal Engine, eventually we're going to have holodeck type games where people are going to be the protagonists. It's going to be that whole virtual, it's going to be incredible. And I think we're just scratching the surface. And I think a lot of people are going to get into game design as a new discipline, not that they already aren't. But your road into game design is you have a great story about that. I wonder if you could touch on how what was your educational process that got you into game design?
Sure. Yeah. Well, just right out the gate, I'm a high school dropout. So there's the jumping off point. I didn't graduate high school. I was academically was not my strong point. And the funny thing is too, even I was always terrible at math, which now is pretty crucial to my job. I never even passed pre-algebra. It was just was about as far as I got. I never did trigonometry or anything like that. No calculus. Yeah, I dropped out of high school, and then just I was young. I was a single dad. I had a kid when I was 19, so I was just trying to find my way in the world, and I started taking. I went to City College right after high school, and pretty much flunked out of that too. And then I took a couple years off, and just try to get myself together. And then went back to City College and just forgot about general ed and trying to get a degree. Really, I just started taking classes that I liked. So like just drawing, photography, television production, editing, stuff like that. And that was fun, and I had a blast, and I got straight A's like pretty much from then out till I stopped going to school, which I took a computer class or two in like Photoshop, and man, like how cool. I'd always drawn since I was a kid, I had art leanings the whole time. But they only had a couple computer art classes at this Cerritos city that I was going to a million years ago. And one of the kids in my class was like, "Hey, Fullerton's got a whole computer lab and a whole program and animation stuff." I'm like, "Oh yeah, let's do that." So I went over to Fullerton City, took every damn class they had over the course of maybe 3 semesters, and learned how to do web design, and then I kind of ran out of stuff to do there as well. So someone else was like, "Hey, Santa Monica City has got this new Academy of Entertainment Technology thing. They had a new program to teach you essentially to do like film effects, get into either animation or film visual effects." So I transferred there. That was a strange one in that you submitted a portfolio. I think about 1,000 people submitted. I think I was one of 200 or so people to get in, that's peculiar for a city college. You don't normally like submit a reel for that, but I got in and learned Maya and traditional, just hand-drawn 2D animation, which was really great training to do. We didn't even touch a computer for the first, year or so.
Wow.
Then learned rigging and everything. And that was basically it. I didn't even finish the program. I got hired by a place while I was in school. So I'm like, all right, well, that's what I was trying to do. So didn't even get a degree. And then did that for a little while I got one film credit, the Dungeons and Dragons movie from
that's cool.
The old one, of which will not be spoken of. The new one's super cool. I just thought it was great. And then kind of pretty quickly made my way over to games in 99. I think I moved up to Seattle for a game company, and then never looked back.
Well, it's you bring up Dungeons and Dragons. I want to show everybody. I was going to ask you, one, do you think that is it a prerequisite? I mean, we all grow up. I call, instead of geeks and nerds, I call our audience imagination connoisseurs. Yeah. And we are connoisseurs of flights of fancy and the imagination. Do you think it's important to be an imagination connoisseur in some way if you want to get into game design? Do you have to grow up a geek loving Star Wars or Star Trek? And I just want to show the people your Dungeons and Dragons room. I have a photograph here that you provided, and here it is. Now, I've seen a couple of celebrity Dungeons and Dragons rooms, and of course Todd Stashwick, who's on Star Trek Picard Season 3. But this is a very impressive Dungeons and Dragons room, and if I notice, the stuff on the walls, I mean, it's deep, man. You have. I mean, this is very, very impressive. So
yeah, it's no joke.
Do people have to be geeks and nerds before they can get into game design? Do they have to love anime? Or not?
It certainly helps. Like, everyone's got their taste differences, but I mean, if you don't play video games, that's I wouldn't call it a deal breaker. I've worked with a very few people in video games that didn't really play them at all, but that's pretty rare. Yeah, I mean, and I think we're probably close in age too. I think like we're about the point at which people we're sort of grew up from essentially as toddlers already having video games in our lives, and that was it. Our whole lives, we some of us were playing games. So yeah, I mean it's not a prerequisite necessarily, but yeah, having a love for games and playing them and familiar with the tropes and mechanics and how it all works, it's certainly going to help one's current video games if you're super into it, for sure. I mean, it's important to be passionate for the thing that you're working on, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Alana Body, all the way from Israel, says, Rob and DJ, we support you in this great new endeavor. And this is, okay, I want to know the answer to this because I've been fascinated with this for a long time. Dub MCZ says, welcome, DJ. I'm curious if you plan on covering Star Citizen. On AOL, I've been a backer since their Kickstarter in 2012, and I find their project is creating revolutionary tech for the future of gaming. Now, for me personally, that's a good question because I want to know, will we ever get that game finished? I mean, every time I see stuff about it, and it all looks really cool.
I mean, let's see. I'm going to bring it up right now. So I'm happy to. I mean, it's sort of a matter of getting it, just sort of, finding a colleague that works there that's interested in coming on.
Right.
Is it not? Star Citizen is in the wild already. Like, it's shipped, hasn't it? Or is it not?
I don't think the full game has shipped. I'm not, to be honest, I'm not sure.
Yeah, or early access.
But the stuff that I've seen, there's beta versions, and it looks amazing. I mean, that's the kind of game that I would like to have, to sit in a cockpit and live in a virtual world and just, go for like, honey, I'm going away for a month. I'm going into my virtual gaming world, and I'm going to travel around the universe. But
well, yeah, I mean, I would be happy to get someone from that team in to interview. That'd be killer.
Well, it's interesting because Evan Cook from Naughty Dog is the first person you interview, and you guys are going to the Video Game Awards before, so you're very well dressed, wearing black tie.
Yeah.
Now that's, by the way, that's the first show drops tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Pacific time here on the channel. It's already locked and loaded and ready to go. And how often are you going to do shows, do you think? What's the schedule going to be?
Sure. Yeah. The plan is to put one out a week, I think is our current thinking. We've already got 3 in the can. I've got 2 more interviews scheduled for next week, and then several sort of, on the burner cooking. Sometimes we have to get approvals through the companies
well, yeah.
people work for, and that takes a little bit of time. But yeah, one a week should be about the cadence we're aiming to hit.
Well, that's another thing I wanted to ask you because, video, like you said, not a lot of people know game designers, so the companies aren't necessarily used to just having people going online and talking about the development of games. And do you find that the video game companies are open to this? Do they want to have the sort of the curtain, looking behind the curtain? Is that something that they're open to?
Yeah, it's generally fine. There's some hoops to jump through for some of the bigger publishers, but and I can kind of paint a picture too. So when I was at Activision, me and some of the other sort of more senior people would do press stuff. We'd do media training. We'd get coached on what not to talk about and what things to focus on that they're trying to promote about the game. There's certain windows of time in the production too that are kind of on and off limits, right? Like, and depending on the size of the game, right? Like, smaller indie titles, like, yeah, they just want to get the word out as many venues as possible, but at a bigger company, the marketing and PR team for a Call of Duty game, that's
yeah,
it's a big machine with a massive budget. So like they have marketing beats scheduled out when the reveal happens, the multiplayer reveal, gameplay trailer. They've got sort of a schedule that like over time where they want beats hitting and they want to keep like kind of splashing, and it's all like this wind up to the ship date, right?
Right.
So the worst thing in their mind is if like before the announce happens, if somebody, on their whatever LinkedIn or ArtStation, like
Yeah.
that used to work there, uploads like visuals, and that's the first impression people have of the game. Like, oh my goodness, like that kind of thing will get somebody fired. Like, don't do that for sure. But like a few months after a game is out, when it's like, they're kind of winding up into award season now. Yeah, they're happy to have their team go out there and sort of talk about what happened in the inside. ArtStation dumps are sort of a common thing these days, where after the game ships, they just ask all the artists to put together cool, behind the scenes footage and concept art, and they put that all up just to kind of build hype for the awesome artwork that went into it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also looking forward. Even if you take a look at classic video games, like the history of video games, like you used to work at Activision. One of my favorite video games of all time, I think I told you earlier, was the late '90s reboot of Activision, of Battlezone. The Battlezone game, I want to say it was 98, 97, 98.
Oh yeah.
That video game, it's still to this day, I've never been as obsessed with any video game as I was with that Activision game. Not just because it was in space, but you played in these hover tanks, and I was fascinated by the physics that they were able to incorporate. Like, you wouldn't just stop; it took a while, and they really got the physics down, and I loved that game. And I'm not saying you have to delve into that, but if you did, I wouldn't object. So, I mean, well, I don't know how many other people would care, but
get ready for episode 2, because we interviewed Mike Arkin, who made Battlezone.
Oh my God, dude, I'm so excited. I mean, that's very exciting because I think the history of the gaming world. I mean, I was there. My family had a Pong console. That's all it was. It was Pong, handball, and tennis or whatever. It's just, and we've actually seen. You can cover. We in our lifetimes have seen the birth of this industry and the revolutionary technology that we're at now. It's kind of spectacular. That's why I'm really looking forward to this show, because of gaming technologies permeating every part of our world on the internet, and now with AI, and how is AI going to affect the creation of games. And
yeah, and there's one interesting convergence too, like, and you can kind of probably blame COVID for this a bit, but the film industry and games is converging a lot more now with all the virtual production LED stages that are out there.
Yep.
Many of those are being run. It's Unreal Engine that's up on those walls behind them. So yeah, we're starting to get, normally, our bread and butter is just straight up games, right? Like, not the cinematics, just the in-game real-time effects. And we're starting to get hit up a little bit by like film production companies for their LED wall stuff. They need, fires and stuff in Unreal Engine.
That's a whole, I mean, was that something you anticipated that you would cross over into film?
Not really. It kind of came out of nowhere, right? Like, The Mandalorian season 1 showed off, and there's some cross-pollination between expertise the other way too. John Root, who I think was one of the mocap supervisors for The Mandalorian season 1, is a buddy of mine. He's worked in, he was basically a mocap expert in games for 10 or 20 years, and then he kind of popped over to film and started doing that in some of the early animated film stuff. But yeah, so yeah, he's worked on The Mandalorian now too, and then COVID hit, and there's just LED stages going up all over the world. Literally thousands of them, and that's all Unreal running on it. So yeah, I didn't see that coming at all. No.
No, I mean, well, I don't think anybody did, and the potential. I mean, everybody. I used to see demonstrations of green screen and what they could use Unreal Engine for, but it wasn't it was after the fact. It was post. But now when you're shooting with Unreal Engine on volume stages, it's live, it's in camera. So
yeah,
and this is something. I mean, even the with the parallax and the view from, it's pretty impressive. I mean, I still think there's been a learning curve. It's obviously before people really know how to use it as effectively as they can. I mean, on The Mandalorian, it's easy when there's desert behind you. But
Yeah.
it's going to get more sophisticated but I think the combination of using real set pieces and then the volume stage, it's going to be interesting to see where it all goes. But it's certainly exciting. And for you guys, I mean, having another revenue stream or being able to create those kinds of effects. I mean, those are effects that you can create effects that can be in camera, so you don't have to wait to see them in post, depending on how they're going to be used, which is exciting.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting too is that's been kind of a learning experience for us. There's certain things that are pretty much on parity in my mind between like film effects and television effects and video games now. Lighting, environments, they look just as good. They can look, with an expert, setting it up, they can look as good in a video game engine as they can, and so that without that, like, this wouldn't be possible at all, right? but it is now. You can have really beautiful looking environments, lighting, but the one bit that is tricky still is our little specialty, effects, fires and explosions and clouds rolling in. On a film, those things take render farms, like, you're spending hours of frame on these scenes to do these like hardcore simulations and light scattering and everything. And in a game engine, we have 16.6 milliseconds, thousandths of a second to like render this stuff. So that has not caught up. Like, so that's kind of what our specialty is like, well, how do you make it look great within those constraints of not having a rendering farm? You have 16 thousandths of a second to draw this thing. But there's some expectation setting to happen there. Like full on volumetric cloud storms rolling in is an ask we've heard more than once now. And it just isn't going to look as good in a game engine and that's sort of our jobs. And as technology, AI, computing power, as that advances, we're approaching it. We're getting closer every generation, but that's a hard one to pull off. It's just not entirely viable in a game engine right now. But that's part of the fun of it too, is like, okay, well, like, what, come on, hack something together. Like, what, do it, make it awesome. So we look for wherever we can shave off milliseconds and get close enough. Like that's a fun field to be in, because like we're kind of pushing the envelope of technology and what's possible at all. And I don't know, that's exciting to me. That's inspiring. It's a fun thing to be a part of, for sure.
Well, what's cool about this show, Architects of Imagination, is that you'll delve into this, and I think as game technology, like you said, the dovetailing of Unreal Engine from gaming into Hollywood and making all different kinds of entertainment is where this whole industry is all going. It's all the dividing lines are no longer as dividing as they used to be. And I'm curious to see you getting into that and hearing the stories of people that are on those front lines. That number you just mentioned about milliseconds, you said that there was a number when we talked earlier. What is that number that you've had to learn to live with, that you've drilled into your head?
Yeah, 16.6 millionths of a second, 16.6 milliseconds. So like I've presented this I've done a lot of talks at SIGGRAPH and convention stuff. I've got a graph that kind of demonstrates. So like, you're rendering a game in real time, right? Which is to say, every time a new frame comes up, you just rendered that. And games are often either in 30 or 60 frames per second, right? Mm-hmm. So the math of that is, if you take 1,000 milliseconds is a second. So if you divide that by 60, the number you get is 16.6. That's how many milliseconds you have. And then within that, like, okay, there's our budget to make this frame right now, 16 thousandths of a second. So the effects budget is 3 of those.
Wow.
So we have to make sure all the volumetric clouds and fire. So yeah, 3 thousandths of a second is how much processing time we get to make sure the explosions and clouds and fires and all that stuff is awesome.
Well, that's just, that's insane when you get, and these are the kind of things I want to, here on this podcast, I know you'll get into it because I'm a Luddite when it comes to game design, and I mean I like playing them, and I'll look at something like Ghost of Tsushima and be like, wow, this is a pretty impressive looking game, you know.
Yeah,
but I don't know how it's made, and that's one of the things I'm looking so forward to watching these shows. So I can't wait for it. Like, what are some of the things that you want to delve into on Architects of Imagination?
Yeah, so like every episode will probably have sort of a through line of a couple of questions we sort of ask everybody. We'll get into each of their sort of, you know, pasts. How did they get into it? What are some of the big games that they worked on? And then I want to spend some time just kind of like on things that I consider to be like inspirational, right? Like what,
Sure.
like where is this headed? Like what, you know, picture video games in 100 years from now, 50 years from now. What is, you know, like so Game Developer Conference just happened. All anyone talked about was AI and what AI is going to do to change our tools and the ethics of it, and it's stealing from artists and like all this stuff.
Right.
And there's people who are completely against it and its use. There's people who are like, oh my goodness, check out all this amazing stuff I'm doing. So like there's I want to get into that kind of stuff.
Where where do you fall on the whole idea of, I mean, look, obviously copyright and AI, it's not generating something from scratch. It's stealing and scrubbing the internet and doing an amalgamation of a bunch of other people's work. But isn't that kind of what human beings do in their own brains? You know, where you take all the things that you're influenced by, like, you know, all your favorite comic artists or your favorite fine artists, and you're using your brain to amalgamate all these things into a new image. So I mean, I don't know what the ethics are behind it. I don't even know how I feel about it. But you know, as far as game design, where are you leaning? Do you think AI is going to be a good tool, or is it something that we need to regulate, or how do you feel about it?
Yeah, great question. You know, I don't know about regulation. I'll leave that up to the politicians, but you know, I understand the criticisms of it, you know, and they range from, you know, ethical questions about, you know, is this just actual theft? And you're right. Like what idea is new, right?
Right. Exactly. I mean,
everything is a remix of what came before. Music is that way. All art is. You know, there's, you know, the ethics of are people going to be put out of work, you know, and if you look back in historically, you know, carriage driver is not a job description anymore. No. But, you know, there will be new jobs. You know, I think like some of the ethical stuff there's fixes for, you know, I wonder if a company will create an image generation AI model that is trained on public domain and opt-in data sets that get right at the complaints. So like, what if, like Spotify, artists could say, yep, I approve, I've signed a contract. The more my stuff gets used, I get a little like royalty off of it.
Yeah, I mean, that could be really if there's a way to track it, like if an AI bumps on your artwork or something, or artists could actually make places that AI could go to draw from. You know, like if there's a way to track that and get paid for it, or maybe subscription services. I mean, that might be too many, but I think you're right. I think there's going to be, and again, you know, new technology is where it's at. I mean, and we just have to figure out how to use it. Alon Abadi from Israel says the world we live in was profoundly changed by AI, and it's true, and it's going to happen again. But how do you think that AI is going to affect gaming?
Yeah, great question. And here's the bit that I'm kind of excited about. And like, if you look at Epic is the company that makes Unreal Engine. They've got you know, you can look at their roadmap for like, what are the things they're developing to put in it next. Some of them are AI driven things, AI driven animation systems. I'm excited about the tools possibilities for it. Like imagine now to make, you know, a Horizon Forbidden West game or a Call of Duty game, like every single environment, every damn blade of grass is like placed by a person, like painting where the grass will go. And
Right.
I'm like, oh, that one's not clipping right. They move it over. So I'm excited about like sort of creating worlds more procedurally, and like I'm picturing like way out. What if now, rather than this is all highly technical, you need an expert to sort of do this stuff. Forget about typing in prompts to a thing. What if, that's going to go away real soon here. This is all going to be Alexa style voice. You're going to talk to it.
Right.
Like one of those early Star Trek movies.
Computer.
Yeah.
Oh, keyboard. How quaint.
I just turned on everybody's a device by saying that word that's watching. But yeah, like I imagine if, like, I'm thinking about world building. I'm hopeful that like small indie teams will be able to do much larger scale work, build worlds with fewer people, which making it easier to make stuff, I think, is a good thing, right? You're going to get more cool stuff that way. I'm picturing like, what if you used image generation prompts? So say I want to make a Dungeons and Dragons like world, use prompts to like kind of come up with functionally what is concept art. Like I want a cloud city. Think of World of Warcraft and how like when you go around zones, there's, they have a color theme. They have like it's an undead area, or it's a lava area, or it's a, fey wooded area. So what if you could sort of come up with concept art that sort of represents that, and then you sort of come up with rules for like, think of like Pokemon Go, where you have geotagged things that you go,
right.
Whatever. What if the concept art is what's geotagged in this generated world, and so the procedural generation of mountains and streams and rivers and cities kind of like just generically makes itself, but then these concept arts skew what the rules are that are making an area. So now all the trees become spooky and spiderwebby and haunted right. over here because I put a concept art right there, and over here it's high elf, fantasy, bright and shiny stuff everywhere. I don't know. I am excited for the possibilities, for ways it can sort of like just empower us to make more cool stuff faster. Yeah, I'm pretty pumped about it.
I mean, well, I was thinking, I remember reading one of my favorite science fiction novels is Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. And it was kind of an extension of what William Gibson did with Neuromancer. But in Snow Crash, they had this idea of the street. And we've seen it in Ready Player One, where there was just this endless street that companies could build real estate on. It's a virtual world. You go in and your avatar. But I always thought, wouldn't it be interesting if, like, let's say you're playing a Western. What if there was an AI-generated planet Earth? Like literally the entire planet Earth in a virtual space. And at any year, you can like punch in, I want to go to 1875 Earth. And the whole planet, so every single city that existed, every single environment, whether you go to Africa, and you could literally travel around, and every single year, you could have the Earth generated in virtual space exactly how big it really is. So you could literally travel and have an AI. And you could do that and go back throughout all of human history. So you literally could travel through. I mean, I don't know if somebody, the power, it would take enormous power and Unreal Engine, the capabilities. But then if you did the same thing, like you could be like, okay, this is Star Wars universe. And you literally had built in virtual space the Milky Way galaxy, or the galaxy that the Star Wars universe is in, or and every planet is there. The actual distances are there. So when you're traveling through hyperspace, you'd literally build, because they'll be able to do this eventually, and that's what I want to do. So when you're playing like a No Man's Sky, the Star Wars version, you've literally built that universe and can go anywhere, but it's the same size it is in real life. So you have to travel through hyperspace for like 12 hours to get to Bezpen or whatever, and I mean, imagine what that would be like. Or you go down to Coruscant and the entire planet's a city. Like, I don't even know what that would be like, but that's what I'm hoping that we're going to get to. I mean, I'd love to. Imagine if having a history class and you have an entire virtual Earth and you could go through all of World War II, where you could zip around the whole European theater, the Pacific theater, and literally watch these battles using real and see real history unfold before you. And of course, it would have to be, you'd have to have some group making sure it was as accurate as possible. But we're going to get there. I mean, we're going to have that kind of, and if you want to participate in the battle, then you're like, ooh, I want to be in the Battle of Bastion, and jump in if you want.
Yeah, and riffing off of that, imagine Google Street Maps is the source for your AI model, where it essentially now has a photograph of like entire cities over time, right? So it is plausible that could be unwound into like not just layout of city in a game engine, but like across time. So the data set's only a couple of years old now, but starting now we have that, and it will continue like on into the future, right? And you can for cities in the middle of nowhere that don't have data sets, it can sort of derive it. But yeah, like here's another thing I've thought of and imagined, like so and just go on a little technical tangent. One under the hood change that was made with Unreal 5, and this is real grognard stuff, but one of the main data types was a float, and now it is a double, and all that means is like the precision that they can represent has just magnified to like, so for example, before in Unreal 4, I think the biggest map that you could have was something like 30 kilometers, right? So you could represent a city. With Unreal 5 now, and that new precision, you can represent down to sub centimeter out to a solar system's size.
That's what I'm talking about. That's right.
So yeah, you can like literally do that stuff now. Imagine if we literally had the data for the entire United States or world down to the level that every placed blade of grass was stored as a piece of memory somewhere on a drive.
Yeah,
like the cloud storage that would be necessary to keep that is incredible. And then to have that with sort of an over time thing where you need essentially snapshots of like every, I don't know what interval, day, year, or just as is enough data to store that, right? But
not yet.
Think of it this way: maybe you don't need to data. It's like if a tree falls in the woods, does anyone hear it? Maybe you don't need to generate any of that until someone actually like goes to a point in space and time, and then the procedural rules like populate that.
Yeah,
now that data exists and gets stored, but you don't have to like store all of it. You can just store the bits that people have gone around in.
I mean, but all this stuff. This is why all of this technology excites me, and how it's going to. I mean, imagine if you had some way using Unreal Engine, or you would go in and they would map your entire internal structure of your body, and like every time you went to the doctor's office, they would do some kind of not like an MRI, whatever they would, you would see your entire circulatory system over time. And if there was blockage, you had a heart problem, you could watch it develop, and then you could extrapolate in a 3D model and you could zoom in and out to, like you said, the smallest. I mean, this kind of technology, again, that's being developed for video games because of those milliseconds is going to spill out over into, and that's what I think I kind of mean when I say by the end of this decade, I see the same kind of revolution that happened with film and the addition of sound. I don't know what this revelation is going to be, but I think it's going to be something along those lines. It's a combination of AI, and because I'm amazed that like Chat GPT was introduced in November,
right?
I mean, and now I wrote a children's book on the phone with Mike Bodden, my business partner. I was trying to explain to him. I said, look at how we can do this, and I just asked it. I gave it a prompt, and I said, give me the first paragraph of a story, and it did. And then Mike said, well, what if you asked ChatGPT to rewrite it in the style of Dr. Seuss? And it did. And then I just kept making up stuff, and suddenly I've got a 30-page children's book that then I can go over to Midjourney You know, and
Yeah.
I haven't done this yet and have the artwork created, and then I upload it to Amazon, and people print the book out, and then they just send me whatever pennies on the dollar I get, and suddenly I'm an author of a published children's book
Yeah, but
called
are you,
Mrs.
though?
Thompson and the Devil. Yeah, am I? Well, they were my ideas. You know, it was like I was working with a friend. Someone was at the typewriter. It was like writing a screenplay, you know. But was I?
Yeah, I mean,
That's the real conundrum.
I think it's here's one thing I'm picturing happening too. I think it's inevitable that is how things are done in the future. I don't know that there's gonna, I mean, get on board, like, or you know, people are gonna get left behind. But where was I going with that? I think there's gonna be backlash against it for a while.
Yeah.
I've already seen artists and creators starting to have projects with like a label that they want to put on it that's no AI was used in this production. Actual humans did it all. And I think there's going to be like a resistance to it. You'll have people, there will be like boycott AI made stuff.
Right.
and I think you're going to have productions where it was some artist in there that used it and it slipped it in, and now the production was anti-AI, but now it's getting boycotted or something. Yeah. But you know, fast forward 50, 100 years, I don't think this is going to be a thing anymore. I think it's just going to be how it's done, honestly.
I agree.
Kind of
Len Art writes in and says, I'm listening at work, and this conversation is blowing my mind. Oh, the possibilities. Well, I mean, but I think you're right, too. Look, obviously, copywriters or people that do design or presentations, I mean, it's really easy now. Like filmmakers in Hollywood are often asked to provide lookbooks. You know, that people want to see if you're trying to get a job, you have to go in literally with a book that's usually like tear sheets or an advertising, Rip-O-Matics or whatever, and you have to use other people's work and say, it's going to look like this. So it was done by, you know, it was done by hand, and we're literally just going in and taking other people's work and showing it. But with AI, if I want to make a lookbook and say, okay, I'm going to make a horror movie that's got a H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu old god or something, and I can just type in and change it around and make it look like whatever I want. So if I'm trying to sell a project using AI, I can actually inject my own ideas into the artwork that's being made, instead of just taking clips from other people's pre-existing movies. I can at least have AI, because I can't draw, but I can have it inject some of the things that I want to see, and suddenly, even though it was AI generated, they're ideas that I had come up with, and I can. It's a better representation of what I'm trying to convey to the people I want to give me money. As opposed to just going, here's David Fincher's Seven. I want my movie to look just like David Fincher's Seven, which, you know, is that a good thing or not?
we started using Rip-O-Matics too on the Call of Duty games at the beginning of productions, as like the early sort of like story pitches are going on, and you know we'd come up with sort of a theme. You know, what era is it going to be in? What are some of the main beats? Yeah, Rip-O-Matics or something that would get made pretty early on in the production to like just give the tone of the of what we were going for with that one. I'll give you a funny anecdote too. This one kind of blows my mind. So Modern Warfare 2 was, so I started right at the end of Modern Warfare 1. I really didn't.
By the way, I love Modern Warfare 2, just so you know.
Me too. It's like an awesome game.
It's awesome.
And that game is like, there are so many things in it that are like, I don't know, what would you call it? Homage?
Yeah.
To Black Hawk Down, right? There are moments in that game that are, you can see some pretty strong parallels there. And there was a moment in time where after that one, I think it was during the production. So Modern Warfare 1 had already come out. We were making Modern Warfare 2, and they're already talking about like, well, you know, maybe a movie, a Call of Duty movie.
Right.
And the person that they were talking to about it was Ridley Scott, and they brought him into our office.
Oh no.
Sat him down, and they had someone show him in our theater and our play through the first like 15 minutes or so of this level of Modern Warfare 2. And and he checked it out. It ended up not happening, the movie, but he left. But like the little surreal thing, and one comment that they said he made, he's like, wow, that whole thing, I don't think Ridley Scott plays video games. I'm gonna guess,
Right.
In that, yeah, he's like, wow, that was impressive. That whole thing was a 15-minute shot. Like, how'd you guys do that? Like, well, that's kind of how video games work. The player is the camera.
Luckily, he's not. And, I did that. You took my shot.
But the little funny like rabbit hole there was we had made a game essentially based on Ridley Scott's movie, and then we were having Ridley Scott watch our game to make a movie about our game that was functionally based on it. Like, I don't know, this is a weird
that's the world. It's great for it's great for how we, and well, that's what I mean, so much stuff is influenced. I mean, you watch those games. Was it Modern Warfare 2 that had the scene at, was it the airport? There's an
I did that level.
Dude.
I did all the
I love that. I mean, I love that game, but it
was shocking. That one made the news, and
it was great.
I stories about that.
I was, because you're playing that game, you're like, wow, this isn't very politically correct in the current environment. I love it. So, it's fantastic. Tom Jr. Jackson, who's our moderator, says, Rob, great interview. DJ, welcome to the channel. Well,
glad to be here.
But no, I think that again, this is something I'm excited about, only because video games, as I said, are the art form of the 21st century, I think. And with the way technology is exponentially increasing, and computing power and Unreal Engine going faster and faster and faster, who knows where we're going to wind up in a year or 2 or 3. And the technology is changing so rapidly. I mean, do you think obviously it takes a long time to develop a great game? Like, nobody can make it overnight. What is the actual production time of a game like a Call of Duty? Like, how long does it take from conception to release?
Yeah, good question. So I mean, there's a lot of variance in there. But so when I started, a Call of Duty game was 2 years. It was a 2-year production.
Wow.
After, I think, Modern Warfare 3, we switched it to a 3-year production. And now they want, there's one comes out every year, right? So, well, how do you put one out every year if it takes 2 to 3 years to make? So for a while, there was a cadence going where they had first 2, so Treyarch and Infinity Ward, where I worked, would leapfrog years. So they would each, do 2-year productions, and then they would kind of, they would stagger who shipped on any given year. Then when we went to 3-year productions, it became 3 studios. We had Sledgehammer, Infinity Ward, and Treyarch leapfrogging each other on 3-year cycles. So that's probably 2 to 3 years is probably common for a sequel these days. If you're doing a new IP, a brand new game with that is not sequelized, it's probably going to be longer. You're talking about probably a 4-year, maybe 5-year production. Just because, like, when you do a sequel, you've got the code base. You're just kind of like modding your own game at that point. You're putting in new stories, new characters, abilities, powers, and stuff. There's games that are on a 1-year cycle. Like, I think a lot of the EA Sports games, they put one out every year, and like, they're on a 1-year cycle. I think Need for Speed was on a 1-year cycle for a while. But yeah, like 5 years is not atypical for like new IPs. I think the longest one I've heard is like about a 10-year cycle. But I think so. Destiny, for example, when I was on Halo 3, Destiny was already being worked on, already created. And 2 more games shipped within Bungie before Destiny came out. So I think, I think Jason Jones was one of the guys. I don't think I ever met him while I was there. He was like working on the, I don't know, game design script, whatever. But yeah, Reach and ODST came out. So it was probably like there had to be a good 8 or so years of production before Destiny launched, but a lot of it is going to be a skeleton crew, just kind of defining what the game is, what is the world, what kind of things do you want to accomplish in it. Yeah, they take a long time to make, and a lot of people.
What are some of the obstacles these days that are make what are the things that video game designers and have to surmount? Like, what is the most difficult thing aside from conceptual things, like what's the game going to be about, and is it the gameplay, is it the design? What are some of the difficulties facing the industry?
Well, I mean, it's hard to make a big AAA production these days, just in that, like, there are so many cooks in the kitchen.
Right.
Like, we're at, Modern Warfare 2, I think we were 75 people. That was maybe even including admin. Now a Call of Duty game probably has over 1,000 people on the production.
Wow.
And just the logistics.
That's a $200 million. That's what a $200 million movie has 1,000 people at work. That's huge. Well, that's why video games are so expensive.
Call of Duty's budget is more. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, what you talk about? What, $500 million, something like that,
with marketing? Yeah, something like that.
But then the returns are huge too. I mean, you read the launch day, and now games, they barely even have to ship. They're just down. You can just download them. You don't. Yeah,
free to play is a whole thing. They would make over $1 billion a game on. Yeah. And now, free to play is kind of turned everything upside down. Now you ship a game for free, and then microtrans. And loot
I'm tired of that.
Stuff.
On my PlayStation 5, I got that Hot Wheels game, and they wanted microtransactions right away. I'm like, come on, man, at least let me play a few levels before I have to buy a car.
Yeah,
I'm not a fan of that. Although I have to say, I do get sucked in on some phone games. You're like, it's $9.99 to get a new box to hide my treasure. Sure, ding ding, why not? And then you spend $100 on a phone game.
I've played several free to play phone games. I don't think I've ever spent any money in any of them.
That's
Not
good.
That I'm actually happy to like support game devs in their endeavor, and yes, please go make another one. But I don't know. I don't really. So many people go bonkers for cosmetic stuff. It's not my thing. I don't really care what my character looks like at all. I'm more interested in, like, what am I doing? What am I playing? But yeah, there's a lot of challenges. Like, frame rate is sort of one of the constant challenges of every game. Like,
tell us about why is that the case? Why is frame rate a thing?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, the math is immutable across generations of consoles. Like every generation. So we're like the Xbox Series X and PS5 are the modern, and then you can have PC games that run on beefier machines than those. But going back to PS1, it does not change that a 60th of a second is 16.6 milliseconds. Like, that has been the same the whole time. That is an immutable thing. So how much you can accomplish in that increases depending on the new generations of hardware, but the resolution also goes up. So we haven't got like a ton more to work with necessarily every generation. We just now support 4K rendering, which is 4 times as much. Is this generation 4 times more powerful than the last one?
Right.
No. But so when you start making a game, and Call of Duty was one of the first shooters to be 60 frames per second. I think we were years ahead of other people.
Right.
And it's not an easy thing to do. Like, I think as like a next generation of hardware came out and people were able to do it, sort of follow suit because they had more processing power. But we did it sort of a generation early. And part of it is just like, this is something that I think it's kind of a lost art. Like, games used to ship on a fucking, on a disc.
No, you can say fucking.
Okay, good. That you couldn't patch. Like, you had to get the bugs out before you shipped. Like
Right.
that was a thing, and there was discipline, right? You tested the shit out of these games,
Yeah.
and you found everything, and if your game crashed or didn't pass, you're not shipping that thing. These days, you would be surprised what goes out on the disc on those things. Everything's patched post-release these days.
Well, it's like, I remember, Cyberpunk came out last year, and that was a big. Yeah, I was really looking forward to that game, and on release date, it was all buggy, and people were complaining, and it's. I mean, I think that's, like you said, that kind of discipline, I think, is important, because when it's happening even in films. I mean, you watch physical media of movies get released with the wrong audio channels, or they don't have the right frame rates, and you know. By the way, this is a totally off-topic question, but somebody's asking it, and I think it's a good question, because I want to show. You have sent me some pictures, and I want to show them. Jared Snyder says, "Is DJ a jazz bassist?" Great conversation. I am way too OG for these games, but I love this behind-the-scenes perspective, and I'm looking forward to the show. Now, before you answer that, I just want to show you have a very impressive studio. This is your music studio, and you sent me these pictures, and here's another one that's more close. I mean, I wish my edit bay looked like this. I don't play music, but oh my God, I look at this, and I mean, this looks like the cockpit of the space shuttle, and it's very, very impressive. So again, how many instruments do you play, and are you a jazz bassist?
I will describe myself as a not good musician. Bass is my main instrument. So this is my Rickenbacker, which I love. That thing is just, it's the greatest. I've recorded on, let's see, 5 albums. I think I'm about 2 years late on our latest EP. The drummer and guitarist have already finished their parts. They're waiting on me. I'm sorry, Dennis. I'll have it to you soon. But yeah, I'm not a great musician. I collect instruments. I have an acoustic instrument study upstairs with every horn, a full drum kit, a baby grand.
Wow.
My parents were both musicians. They were on the Ed Sullivan Show when I was a kid. And yeah, just music was part of my life growing up. So I play a little bit. My old college band, we still put out an album every, I don't know, once in a great while. But yeah, I'm not a good musician, and it's not really jazz. It's more so shoegaze, I guess, is the category, which was, when I was in high school, that was a sort of subgenre of alternative music. It's kind of somewhere between, like, if you put together the Pixies, Cocteau Twins, Pink Floyd, U2, The Cure, kind of somewhere around there.
Pixies and the Cocteau Twins are both on 4AD, one of my favorite record labels of all time.
Hell yeah.
There was at one point where I was obsessed with owning every single 4AD release for about 25 years. Then
The cover art on everything they put out was so great.
Incredible. Chuck the Mystery has 2 questions. He says, "Hey Rob, on Designing Hollywood," this one I guess is for me. You were talking to Daniel Orlandi about your experiences with my favorite director, Joel Schumacher. St. Elmo's Fire, Lost Boys, Flatliners, Phone Booth are some of my favorite films of all time. How did you first encounter him? Well, that kind of relates back to Architects of Imagination. I encountered him. He was the very first person that Martika Ibarra and Marilyn Vance had me interview on the Designing Hollywood podcast. And I have to say, the first time I met him, I was really nervous because it was an in-studio interview. And I met Martika at a party and was dazzling her with my knowledge of Marilyn's 80s oeuvre off the top of my head. She's like, "You should do a podcast with us." And I'm like, okay. I wasn't planning on doing it, but she twisted my arm, and so she got Daniel Orlandi. And first of all, I love that guy, and it's funny. I just did another interview with him that's up on the John Campea channel, and I ran into him at the Smokehouse, which is a restaurant across the street from Warner Brothers that George Clooney owns, and he bought it. That's why his company's called Smokehouse Productions. And it was funny because I was there with Terry Matalas, the showrunner of Picard season 3, and I turned and I went, "Daniel," and I was at the next table, and he goes, "Of course I would see you here at the Smokehouse." I'm like, what can I say? So, but Chuck the Mystery goes on to say, so that's how I met Daniel Orlandi. He's great. This is a good question. Chuck says, "Hey Rob, DJ, do you find that third-party developers avoid certain platforms simply because of the difficulty of using certain development kits or other factors?"
Yeah, that's a good question, and for those are some sort of industry terms that people might not be familiar with too. So first party versus third party is to say, so think of it this way: Activision is a publisher, kind of the film industry equivalent of what we would call a studio, right? There's the main like owners of the thing and funding it and everything. And then in a game, under a game publisher, they might have what they would call first party studios. So Infinity Ward is a first party studio of Activision, their publisher.
Right. Okay.
They're from, in corporate terms, they're a wholly owned subsidiary. But so Treyarch, Activision has about 12 first party companies. Now, some publishers will make games with not first party studios that they own, but third party studios that they just write a contract with. So the publisher will pay for the production of the game. They will market it. They will get physical discs out to, well, that's becoming less of a thing now with digital download, but that was part of their role before. So third party are functionally just hired guns. And you ask about dev kits. So a dev kit is, and there's two kinds of these. There's test kits and dev kits. So what is that? When I'm, at Infinity War, I don't have one anymore. You could call my company sort of a third party developer, right?
Okay.
When I was at Activision, they would give all the testers test kits, and they would give all the people sort of creating the game dev kits. And the difference between them is test kits are a couple $100 and dev kits are, I don't know, 10, 20,000 or something. They're very expensive. Sure. So a small, we're a 16-man, small operation. It is a little out of the scope, budget for us to be giving all of our artists, $10,000-$20,000 dev kits.
Right.
I don't know though that people avoid doing games because of that. Third parties would avoid I don't know. I don't think so. Because mainly people are just developing on PC, really, and then when you hit the build button, there's certain differences between the platforms, and you actually, well, somebody is going to have a dev kit because you have to load it and run it and see if it works and make sure that the different kinds of certification there's it's called a cert list. We call it a certification list. Sure. Where when you hit the Xbox button, does the friends list come up, and does it, cause the game to shut down? There's all this stuff that you have to. So yeah, a lot of times the publisher and test in a third party production will help with that. So my gut is, in general, no. I don't think third party companies avoid platforms necessarily because of dev kits. And one other point on that too: the difference between a dev kit and a test kit. A test kit is functionally the same exact hardware as the one that you could go buy at Best Buy, right? It's almost identical, but it's software, and there's little things about it that allow it to go into a developer mode, which is to say I can take a game from my computer and push it to the test kit and then load it on the console and run it just like I would run one at home. You can't do that on a what we call a retail one that you would buy at Best Buy.
Sure.
So a test kit allows for that. A dev kit, it's more expensive. It's got more memory in it, and it allows you to do other things. You asked about like difficulties and how to make sure you run in frame rate. So developer kit has got a bunch of debug stuff that you can connect to. You can get state dumps of the GPU and the CPU and analyze them in software on your PC to see like how we do billionth of a second timings for things like you're making the game, you're just putting everything in there, and like, oh shit, the frame rate sucks right here. Like something's overloaded. I don't know if it's the GPU or the CPU. So like the dev kit will allow you to do a state dump, and then you can step through every single object that drew, and you can look at how many nanoseconds, which is to say how many billions of a second it took to draw every single thing on there. And so you just kind of look at the list and you sort by size and you go, oh my goodness, I put 2,000 smoke particles filling the screen right here. That is eating 29 of my 3 millisecond budget. So I need to turn that down. So that's what a dev kit is and kind of how it works. But yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, one more thing I wanted to show. You're kind of a game historian. I wanted to show your retro gaming place that you have. Is that in that room you're in now? Is it just another?
Yeah, it's right over here
there
to my
well
left.
Here's a picture of your retro gaming station, and look at that keyboard. Is that like a Commodore 64 keyboard? I mean, I look at that and think, my God.
Yeah.
It's Commodore 64?
It's a Commodore 64. Yeah, it's a real functional, still working from 19. The best-selling computer ever is the Commodore 64. I forget the numbers, like how many, but there were more of those sold than any computer ever has sold before.
That is
so
just
still a bunch in the wild, and you can I'm loading. One thing that's funny too is I was always told that, floppy disks, those like, and in the recording industry too, like magnetic tape,
yeah,
like masters, like 2-inch masters, like they have a shelf life of about 50 years and they just turned amuck, is what I've always been told. So I just set this thing up and I put an old Pools of Radiance, the first Dungeons and Dragons game, I just put in the disk drive and still reads it. That disc is I'm 50 years old or 49 right now. So we're pushing the limit of but maybe they're more durable than we were
well
told.
Yeah, I mean, I have people said that CDs, like I was a big home video guy, so Laserdiscs, for instance, when the Laserdiscs were initially introduced to the market in 1978, and what happened to a lot of Laserdiscs is Laserdiscs were actually, you had a piece of metal and then 2 pieces of plastic that were glued together, and a lot of the time the glue would let go and would let air in, and the information on the discs would oxidize. So it was it was called laser rot. So your beautiful image would suddenly become sparkly with color where the image was corrupted. So and that was because American glue was bad. So you wanted to get Japanese laser discs. But
okay.
But CDs, I have CDs I bought from 1983 and they still work fine. Totally. they're that's pushing, I guess, 40 years before. I can't believe I have CDs that are 40 years old. That's and I have a CD player here hooked up to this computer. I still use my CDs, but it's amazing to see, like, where are we going to be in 75 years or 100 years? Will these games be preserved? Is there a Library of Congress of video games where people are actually preserving all of these things? I mean, shouldn't they be?
Well, I mean, there's not exactly. So there are what's called like ROM archives now. So,
right. Yeah, because you can get old emulations and things like that.
Yeah, and I prefer like the actual stuff. Like I've got ROMs and MAME stuff, and there are also like there's a computer museum, and I think there's an arcade like history museum that sort of goes on the road and tours around. That is kind of trying to collect all of them. But yeah, there's efforts just by various channels to see that they get preserved.
Yeah, because I got to show this your retro gaming station. Somebody in the chat here is asking. The Ghost Dragon says, "Was that in Intellivision I saw? I spy in Intellivision. There it is." And the Intellivision, I never had a 2600. I went right to Intellivision, and we talked about the weirdness. Those controllers are weird. With the dial, and then they were weird, but they had some of the greatest. Early on, they had some of the greatest competition games you could play with your friends. Like, one of my favorites was Sea Battle. Sea Battle is an incredible game. There's another game called Utopia, where you're both masters of this island. You each have an island, and you have to build up and tornadoes can come and take out your buildings. I mean, but the most rudimentary. And then the B-17 bomber, when they added that voice vocoder thing that B-17 bomber. I used to love that. That was amazing.
I like Astro Smash.
Astro Smash is. I remember when that came out. That wasn't that Activision. Was Astro Smash?
It might be. I'm not sure.
Because Activision did a bunch of. They had their own. They were like a third-party developer for Intellivision, I think.
Yeah, that was the early heyday of Activision, and it like there's kind of a fun story behind it too. Like Activision,
I think Astro Smash was standard in television, but Activision did because they did like Phoenix. They had that like Phoenix ripoff that they made for Intellivision that I loved. I love those third party because they had the different colors on there. The Intellivision packaging was all standardized, but then Activision came along and they had like silver and all this. I love when they put stuff out.
Yeah, and the different genres of games came in a different box color. So like sports were like green or something.
Yeah, and they had golf.
Yeah,
golf.
Yeah, and actually, so this Intellivision doesn't work. I bought it on eBay. Yeah, I've been watching videos for I don't know. So woodworking was my COVID hobby. I learned, and I made this desk. I made my D&D room table and the shelves.
Wow.
So I guess my next hobby is electronics. I'm gonna see if I can try to fix this Intellivision. I've been watching videos for how to multimeter the power supply, and I don't know anything about that, but I'm about to learn.
Nice.
That's Intellivision.
But that's amazing. I mean, you got to get that in television to work. I mean,
yeah. It kicked off buying that. So my Dungeons and Dragons room, we're playing a sort of a game, sort of a historical D&D retrospective. So we're playing with the old 1974 rules, and we're going through the books in publishing order. So we're this, tomorrow we're probably finishing Palace of the Vampire Queen, the first ever created D&D module by a company called Warriors, and we're gonna eventually get to the first TSR. Anyway, so we're sort of going through time with D&D, and I wanted to incorporate the computer games too. So the first Dungeons and Dragons video game was on the Intellivision,
which, by the way, was a great game.
Yeah. So I want to play it, but the damn thing doesn't work.
That game was
buy a new one or get it fixed.
It was awesome. Now, just speaking of Activision, since we've been talking about it, that and Intellivision, here is this is the Activision Intellivision Pitfall. So it's got there's on the bottom left there are the card overlays that slide into the controller, and there's your cartridge, and then obviously the manual. So that's some classic Intellivision goodness right there. But that Dungeons and Dragons game, I love. That game was really, really good. I mean, you had what was the was it Adventure, the 2600 game that you went through but I remember getting the Intellivision D&D game, and that just blew Adventure away. It blew it out of the water, and I couldn't get enough of that game.
It was great. Yeah, and there's two of them. There's two D&D games for Intellivision. So I'm excited. I own one of them. Once I get the Intellivision fixed, I'll buy the other one. Play through them.
Yeah, which is great. Well, listen, I mean, I've kept you here now for almost 90 minutes. So, I mean, this has been a fantastic conversation. I think people have really been enjoying it. Do you have anything you want to say about the release of Architects of Imagination that we haven't already covered?
Yeah, and there's one question that we backing up a minute too before we wind down.
Yeah,
one thing that we talked about, and we kind of jumped into some other stuff that I wanted to speak out a little more was, how about performance and how one makes a game that's 60 frames per second, where Infinity Ward did it early on. There's something that we did then that I don't think is really done anymore, and it's kind of simple and obvious. But a lot of games struggle, like it's hard to get games into frame rate. So we had a policy where, I mean, being the first to accomplish something doesn't happen by accident, right?
Sure.
It is a very intentional that like we are putting out a 60 frames per second game. So here was our stupid trick to do that. We had frame rate targets through departments. So when you make a game, you do the level in like a gray box, right? Which is just, you block it out. So multiplayer levels in particular, because they need to have solid frame rate. So they would come, they were, I forget the exact numbers, but levels had to come out of gray box and go to the art team at like 90 frames a second, 85, something like that. And then when art was done with it and they came over to effects, it had to come out of the art department at like 70, or let's see. So our final target is 60. So it had to come out of art at like 70, 75, and it had to come out of effects. We had to be done with it, and it still had to be over 60, not just 60. It had to be north of 60. We had to get it out of effects
Right.
at
Yeah.
65 or 68, so that was the baseline. So we hit way more than 60 FPS, so that when you started shooting and throwing smoke grenades and all the chaos is going on, the dips are still over 60. And
wow.
that was just the hidden mojo that we were doing at the time. And like, I don't know, this is kind of like a lost art. A lot of now it's just like the game productions these days are more like just put everything in, and then at the end it's like someone goes and like, all right, well, we didn't hit frame rate, like turn the resolution down or pull some stuff out. You kind of optimize your way out of the problem as opposed to being intentional about it to begin with. And I think that was kind of a big deal. It was, we were ahead of our time for having done that.
I think that what you just described, I mean, doing things the correct way, as opposed to, like you said, let's lower the resolution, let's make the game less good rather than hit the frame rate, because the frame rate is what you're. So let me ask you this. So on my OLED, I've got in my movie room, whatever, I have an OLED that TVs are run at 60 hertz. So, you've got 30 and 60 frames. If you add motion smoothing, which I cannot stand. I can't watch movies or TV. It's just awful. The first thing you have to do is, especially, so like with movies that were obviously shot at 24 frames, one of the big advances was with the DVD, you could watch movies at progressive scan. Normally, a frame rate on a TV, a show would be, it was 30 frames, and then if it was interpolated, you had 60 video fields. So you had 60 video fields a second, and they were going brrr. And then when the DVD came along, you could have solid frames and watch it 24 frames, basically, and 3.2 pull down 30 frames. But they were solid frames, so they weren't interpolated. So when you're running something at 60 frames a second, are there actually 60 frames there? There's 60 frames.
Yeah, 100% for games. They just feel more responsive. They feel like more fluid and controlled.
So it's not interpolated like it used to be, where you're watching 30. So that's great. So it's 60 frames. You know what? I was never clear on that. Now I'm clear on that. So to optimize, if you're playing a console game, if you're playing Call of Duty on a PlayStation 5 or something, should you be running your TV at 60 frames if you can, if it's capable of that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Sure. Games can select what frame rate they ship at. A lot of games are 30 frames per second, but tons these days are 60. It just feels better.
Because it's smoother. I mean, you've got, obviously it's going to look better.
Here's an interesting thing too. Like it, anytime you have DSP, digital signal processing, so that motion smoothing, you're introducing latency. Latency is a big deal in video games because, like, when you're watching a movie, as long as the sound and visual are synced, it doesn't matter at all. Like, you ever try to like do it over the phone call or something, and like everyone hit play at the same time, but there's a delay in both directions, so like it can't be correct. But on a video game, if there's lag, if there's delay in your controls, and you turn right and then like it happens later, that is no bueno. Like, the funny thing is, all TVs these days have a game mode, and what that's doing is just turning off all that extra processing, so that they're functionally just passing through the raw signal from the console.
Right.
And you, like, whenever I go to someone's house and they had, back in the day when they'd have Guitar Hero on or something, and I'd be like, baffled that they're playing video games not in game mode,
Right.
and like, they're trying to hear and hit these things that have this latency lag delay in them. I'm like, how this is unplayable to me. I don't know how you're doing it, but here's the thing that's fascinating that I learned, and not to go on. Do we have time for another like crazy tangent?
No, please go. I'm just worried about your time. I mean, you're graciously giving us your time, so take all the time you want. I'm in no hurry.
So I've wondered about this. Like, imagine what percentage of people in America are playing games on a TV that they have not set to game mode. It is some statistically significant percent. 20%. I don't know. Like, a lot of people just don't even know that that's a thing. And so their TV is giving them a lagged picture. And like, and the funny thing is they don't know it, right? They're not aware. They're functioning just fine in multiplayer games. They're I assume winning battles from time to time in this weird lag world. So here's the thing that I heard that was kind of an explanation is your brain has time delay resolution circuitry in it, actually quite a bit. And one proof of that is that if you go to like the Science Center, you know, they have those reaction time tests where you know, you see the light start to go up the thing and you hit the button.
Yeah.
And it tells you how many milliseconds. So there's an audio, there's one for vision, which is a light that goes up. There's another one for sound where a sound beeps and you hit the button. And it is true pretty much across the board that the delay for visual stimulus takes longer than it does for audio stimulus. Just because, like, think about the amount of data involved, right? Audio, ears. If you think about a video file versus an audio file, I mean, they're just more massive. So it's easier for your brain to sort of resolve what is going on from your vibrating eardrum to turning that into sounds and pitch and the words that you're translating into words versus like the amount of photons hitting your eyeball and resolving that against like your visual circuitry in your brain. But we don't have, so like your brain is resolving the sound faster. And that reaction test thing kind of demonstrates that, right? It is a measurable difference in time. But we don't have the sense, the feeling, like we feel like just our reality is here and I'm talking to you and like if I snap, like I see this and I hear it at the same time. So it is believed, I think, that the audio input is being held slightly until your visual circuitry kind of is able to resolve, and then it like creates this reality of them together, right? So I think that going back to that the game mode on a TV, I think people's brains just have this latency compensation stuff going on. So they just acclimate to it, and it becomes like this sense of reality, even though there's this weird lagged delay in there. And I don't know, I find that super fascinating.
Wow. You know, dude, now that you've told me this, it's like I can't unknow it. I'm gonna have to go back and look at all my, you know, games and wonder if, because there were times when I was playing my games not through game mode because, you know, I had tweaked my TV to look as good as it could, but I wasn't.
Cinematic.
Yeah, and I got my cinema. I mean, I tweaked my TV. I'm like, if I went back into game mode, I'd have to retweak everything to make it look, and video games look different than movies anyway. And if you're playing something at 60 frames, you know, but now that you've told me this, I've got my Xbox X and my PlayStation 5 going through the in our little media room, and I'm like, now I've got to go. I got to rejigger the TV and only go through game mode and wonder how have I been doing this all these years.
The games will feel way better.
Yeah, now I'm gonna go play Grand Theft Auto 5 all the way through in story mode again.
Awesome.
It's 60 frames. See, well, if it wasn't for this, is why people, you need to watch Architects of Imagination, a game dev podcast hosted by DJ, to learn these things.
That's right.
And listen, I want to thank you for your time. Can people find you on social media?
Yeah. The two main ones, I've got, all of them, but the two main ones that I use are YouTube and Twitch. I've got a YouTube channel and Twitch. They're both just undertone_DJ. My Twitch channel, I stream my D&D games on Saturdays. There's one at noon Eastern and one at 7 Eastern that we stream. And my YouTube channel's got a bunch of stupid D&D stuff up there.
Well, since you brought it up, let's take one more look at your D&D. I mean, this setup is dope as fuck. I can't believe this. I mean, it looks so good, man. And now, did you make that table? You made your table?
I did, yeah. Put it back up. I want to point out a couple features in there that are.
Oh, hang on. To do that, I've got to just add. I've got to add one more section for you so people can hear. Hang on. So let's see. All right, here I'm going to put this up, and let's.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Notice all those things on the ceiling. So those are all the dead characters. When someone dies in the game, I take their character. Hand me your character sheet is a term that instills fear. And I have a deceased stamp, and I just pound it right in front of them, pin it to the ceiling. There's also a little mic there, if you can see the little red button. So that soundboard there is for voice filtering. So I can do like ogre voices and dragons and gnomes and females and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, we have a lot of fun. It's a good time. So yeah, we Twitch our games on Saturdays. That's right. Yeah, I've got all of the core rule books for every edition. So the very top left corner thing is chainmail, the precursor to D&D, and then the white box is like the original 1974 rules, which you can see the books like in the foreground, like in the corner next. So that's what we're playing right now. And then across the top row are the 3 different basic sets over time. The next row is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, starting at the 1st edition, and then there's 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and then I have every 5th edition book, and I'm collecting all the old 1st and 2nd edition modules, and you can see little tiny 1-inch. I printed out little tiny module covers to kind of show you what's in the shelves behind there. Yeah, all the minis on the left. There we go. Yeah, we have a lot of fun. Oh, I hear you still. Oh, okay. Yeah, tune in. First episode's live tomorrow at 6:00. I think Pacific. This is when it's going live. Yeah, Eben Cook, the first guest. We talk about all this crazy game stuff. He's the visual effects director for Naughty Dog. The Last of Us, such phenomenal games. The show is amazing. And then yeah, we've got a couple more episodes coming up after that, and you're gonna meet some pretty funny, interesting people. There's a lot of silly stuff that goes on in game dev, and you're gonna get some stories.
Well, I think people can hear me now. Yeah, I think they can. So
He's back.
I'm back. I think I'm back. Well, listen, I just want to, DJ, thank you so much for being here. Very much appreciate it. And I can't wait for everybody to see Architects of Imagination, which again drops tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern. And it's about a half an hour long, I think, the first episode.
Yeah, 40 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And then, whenever we got more, I'll just lock and load, and I can set them up. I'll have them up. We've had this up like a week in advance. This one was up a few weeks in advance, so people can see and plan and all that. And then I'd love to have you on and do this, maybe once a month, where we can talk about people might have questions because the shows are pre-recorded, so they're not live. But we can look in the live chat and then maybe answer people's questions that have them, and it'd be good because having this conversation with you is fantastic. I mean, I've learned so much today. So thank you, thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to do it. Happy to be back on whenever. Just give me a shout.
All right. Well, everyone, that was DJ. Thank him for being here. We'd give him a big clap. And as we all know, I say the same thing at the end of these shows. Every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. I want to thank everyone for subscribing to the channel, becoming members, and generously supporting via super chats and tips. I also want to thank our moderator, Tom Jr. Jackson, for moderating today. And remember, members, we are having our bi-weekly member call tomorrow at 11 o'clock. I will send out a link for it. And with that, I bring Robservations episode 844, which is, I think there might be another Robservations today. Not sure, but there might be. Thanks for being here. And once again, thanks to DJ and everybody involved with Architects of Imagination. And we're out, dude.